In the heart of Mordor, surrounded by his orc legions and the ever-watchful Eye, Sauron was the master of his domain, no question. But there was one ancient power lurking in the shadows of the mountains that he absolutely did not control. A creature of such primordial darkness and bottomless hunger that even the Dark Lord himself didn't dare to get too close. This is the story of Shelob's hidden curse, the one power in all of Mordor that refused to bend to Sauron's will. When you think about the great evils of Middle-earth, your mind probably jumps straight to Sauron or his old boss, Morgoth. We picture their armies, their burning desire for control, and the terrible, twisted order they wanted to force upon the world. They were planners, architects of evil with a purpose behind every dark move they made. But nestled in the Ethel-Duoth, the Mountains of Shadow, was a totally different kind of evil. An evil that was ancient, chaotic, and completely independent. Shelob the Great, the monstrous spider of Cirith Ungol, was not one of Sauron's minions. She wasn't a soldier in his armies or a captain of his legions. She was a force of nature, a holdover from a forgotten age, and her only loyalty was to her unending hunger. Sauron knew she was there, he tolerated her, and he even found her useful, but he never, ever commanded her. And in that lack of control, in this pocket of primordial chaos within his own perfectly structured kingdom, lay a hidden curse. She was an unpredictable variable, a unique and serious threat to a lord who demanded absolute power. To really get a handle on this threat, we have to go way back, long before the Third Age, to the very dawn of darkness itself. Chapter 1. The Primordial Origins. Shelob's story doesn't start in Mordor. It begins in the mists of the Elder Days, with a terrifying and mysterious being, her mother, Ungoliant. Elven lore isn't even sure where Ungoliant came from. Some stories say she was a primordial spirit from the darkness that surrounded the world before it took its final shape. Others guess she might have been a Maya, a spirit from the same order as Sauron and Gandalf, who was corrupted by the first Dark Lord, Melkor, way back in the beginning. What we do know for sure is that Ungoliant was a creature of pure, absolute hunger. Her defining trait was a bottomless lust for light, which she would devour and then vomit back out as a tangible darkness, a living shadow that smothered all life. She was the void made real, a being of pure consumption. For a while, she teamed up with Melkor, and together they pulled off one of the most devastating acts in Arda's history. They destroyed the two trees of Valinor, which gave light to the world. Ungoliant drank them dry, growing so monstrously huge and powerful that even Melkor himself got scared of her. When he refused to let her eat the Silmarils, she turned on him. He was only saved when his Balrogs showed up, their whips of fire driving her away. Fleeing that fight, Ungoliant ended up in a valley that would come to be known as Nan Dungortheb, the Valley of Dreadful Death. There, she mated with other foul spider creatures that lived in the darkness. And there, she spawned her nightmarish children. Shelob was her last and greatest child. While her mother's final fate is a mystery, some tales say that in her endless starvation, she finally ate herself. Shelob survived. She inherited all of her mother's ancient evil, a being made of shadow and hunger. After the War of Wrath destroyed Beleriand at the end of the First Age, Shelob fled south. Long before Sauron ever set foot in Mordor, long before the first stone of his dark tower was laid, she had already made her home in the high mountain passes. She was an ancient evil that had carved out her own piece of Mordor, a dark kingdom of tunnels and webs in the pass that would forever be known as Cirith Ungol, The Pass of the Spider. Chapter 2. An Uneasy Alliance. For thousands of years, Shelob lived alone in her labyrinth, Cirith Ungol. She grew fat and bloated on the blood of elves and men who were foolish enough to try and use the secret pass into Mordor, weaving webs of shadow and despair. Her children, the lesser spiders she had with miserable mates she always ended up killing, spread far and wide, infesting Mirkwood and the hills of Dol Guldur. But none of them ever came close to their mother in size, malice, or power. When Sauron rose to power in the Second Age and built his kingdom in Mordor, he was fully aware of the ancient terror living in his backyard. You'd think a Dark Lord would want to destroy a creature like that, to wipe out any rival power in his land. But Sauron was a pragmatist. He saw Shelob not as a problem to be solved, but as a tool to be used. He actually liked that she lived there, seeing her as a more terrifying guard for his secret entrance than any army of orcs or fortress he could build. And so began one of the strangest, most unsettling relationships in Middle-earth's history. It wasn't an alliance, and it definitely wasn't a master-servant relationship. Shelob served no one but herself. Tolkien described their dynamic with a curious analogy. Sauron thought of her as his cat. Every now and then, he'd toss her a treat, sending prisoners he had no use for into her lair. He'd even have his orcs report back on how she played with them. And if she occasionally snatched an orc for a snack, well, they were expendable. This arrangement was just mutually convenient. Sauron got a perfect, sleepless guardian for his back door, and Shelob got a semi-regular food delivery service. The orcs stationed at the Tower of Cirith Ungol lived in constant fear of her ladyship, as they called her, and would desperately try to block the entrances to her tunnels. But Sauron let her be, happy with this cold, symbiotic relationship. But calling her his cat was just a way for Sauron to make himself feel better about his lack of control. Tolkien is crystal clear about this, writing, "His cat, he calls her, but she owns him not." That simple line says it all. Sauron, the master of wills, the lord whose entire philosophy was built on dominating everything and everyone, had a neighbor he couldn't command. He could appease her and use her, but he couldn't earn her loyalty. She was an independent entity of pure evil living inside his empire. And it's right there, in that independence, that we find the true nature of her hidden curse. Chapter 3. The Hidden Curse. The Nature of Sauron's Fear. To get why a creature like Shelob would make someone as powerful as Sauron uneasy, you have to look beyond just physical strength. Sauron's power was all about order, control, and purpose. His evil had a system, a hierarchy, all aimed at enslaving the world under one perfectly controlled will. Shelob was the exact opposite of that. Her evil wasn't about ambition, it was about appetite. First and foremost, her hunger was terrifying because it couldn't be satisfied. It wasn't a desire for power or territory. It was a primal, nihilistic urge to just consume everything, mind and body, elf and man, and turn it all into food. As Tolkien wrote, she wanted a glut of life, alone, swollen till the mountains could no longer hold her up, and the darkness could not contain her. That's a kind of evil that Sauron, for all his dark wisdom, couldn't really understand or control. He wanted to rule the world. She just wanted to eat it. You can't reason with that, you can't bribe it, and you certainly can't bring it into your command structure. Then there was her ancient alien magic. Her powers weren't the crafted sorcery of Sauron. They were a primordial force she inherited from the darkness before the world began. She didn't just spin webs of silk, but of shadow itself. A tangible unlight that actively smothered any illumination. The same power her mother used to drain the trees of Valinor. Her venom wasn't a quick poison. It was a paralytic that kept her victims alive and aware,
perfectly preserved for her to eat at her leisure. Over the ages, her hide had grown so thick and corrupt that it was almost impossible to pierce with any blade. These weren't the powers of a simple beast. They were the traits of a demon, a living piece of a more elemental and chaotic age.
But the real heart of Sauron's fear, the hidden curse, was her total, absolute independence. Sauron's entire empire was a pyramid of command, with his will sitting right at the top. From the Nazgul down to the lowest orc, everyone was just an extension of him. But Shelob didn't fit. She was a black hole on his map of control, a part of his own kingdom where his authority just stopped. He couldn't trust her to know the difference between friend and foe. An army marching for him was just as likely to get eaten as one marching against him if they stumbled into her path. She was a weapon he couldn't aim, and a guard who might just devour his own soldiers. That unpredictability was a weakness Sauron could never fix. His evil was calculated order, hers was primal chaos. He could understand Saruman's ambition or men's greed because he could manipulate those feelings. But a being of pure, mindless, eternal hunger, that was something else entirely. She was a living symbol of a darkness older and deeper than his own, a constant reminder that some forces in the world simply could not be bent to his will. That was Shelob's hidden curse. To be the one thing in the heart of Mordor that Sauron couldn't control, a festering pocket of chaos that mocked his dream of absolute order. Chapter 4: The Encounter with the Hobbits. For all her ancient power, Shelob's most famous moment wouldn't be with a great warrior or a mighty elf lord, but with two small hobbits from the Shire. Led into her lair by the treacherous Gollum, Frodo and Sam found themselves in a place of total despair. The air was thick with the foul stench of death, and the darkness was so complete it felt like it had weight, crushing all hope and courage. This was where Shelob's dark magic was strongest. The very air of her home was a psychological weapon, and Shelob herself was a patient, cunning hunter. She let the hobbits struggle through her maze of webs, just waiting for the right moment to strike. When she did, she ambushed Frodo and, with one swift sting, paralyzed him. Her plan was to wrap him up and save him for later. But she didn't count on the fierce loyalty and shocking courage of Samwise Gamgee. In a desperate rage, Sam fought off Gollum and turned to face the monster that had taken down his master. What happened next is one of the most incredible moments of bravery in the entire story. Sam was no great warrior, but he had two things that were poison to Shelob: the elven blade Sting and the Phial of Galadriel. Sting was an ancient blade forged specifically to fight giant spiders, and the Phial held the light of Earendil's star, which itself contained the light of a holy Silmaril, the very same light Shelob's mother, Ungoliant, both craved and hated. When Sam held up the Phial, its light blazed forth, searing Shelob's clustered eyes and sending her reeling in agony. For a creature born of darkness, this pure, undiluted light was an unbearable torture. Blinded and furious, she tried to crush Sam under her massive body, but in her rage, she made a fatal mistake. As she lunged, Sam held the point of Sting upwards with both hands. Driven by her own malice, Shelob impaled herself on the sharp blade. The ancient sword, held by a simple hobbit, finally pierced her ancient hide, something no great warrior had ever managed. With a bubbling shriek of pain, she retreated, squeezing her wounded body back into the darkness of her lair. She wasn't killed, but for the first time in thousands of years, she had been defeated. And not by a king or a wizard, but by the love and courage of a humble gardener. Chapter 5: Modern Interpretations and Lingering Shadows.
Of course, Tolkien's books are the final word, but modern takes on Shelob are fascinating and show just how compelling she is. In the video game Middle-earth: Shadow of War, for example, Shelob gets a much more complex role. She's shown as a being who can take on a beautiful human form and has the power of foresight, even acting as a reluctant guide to the main character. The game even hints at a past romance with Sauron that ended in betrayal. While these ideas are a big departure from the books, they play with that core idea of Shelob as an intelligent, powerful, and independent being with her own story. These modern retellings really highlight what makes her more than just a monster. She's a character with her own agency. Whether she's a shape-shifting oracle or the primal horror from the books, the one thing that stays the same is her independence and her ancient, alien nature. Conclusion. Shelob was never really Sauron's ally. She was a relic, a living fossil from an age when the world was run by more primal, chaotic forces. Her evil wasn't the calculated, spreadsheet malice of Sauron. It was the raw, instinctual hunger of the void. She represented the untamable wilderness, the darkness that exists beyond the reach of any king or dark lord. For Sauron, the ultimate control freak who wanted to bend all of Middle-earth to his will, Shelob was a constant, nagging reminder of his own limits. She was a curse hidden in plain sight, an uncontrollable power at the heart of his kingdom, a symbol of the primordial chaos that could never really be conquered. Her presence was a flaw in his perfect system of evil, a shadow that his light could not command. After her fight with Sam, she dragged her wounded body into the deepest pits of her lair. The books wonder, did she slowly heal over long, dark years, waiting for her hunger to drive her to spin her webs once more? Or did she finally give in to her wounds, or maybe even her own endless appetite, just as her mother might have? The story doesn't say. And so, even after Sauron fell and the Fourth Age began, the thought of Shelob lingers. A chilling possibility that deep in the forgotten tunnels beneath the mountains of Mordor, an ancient and insatiable evil may still be lurking, patient as stone, immortal as shadow, a final, terrifying echo of a darkness the world can never truly be rid of. If you loved digging into this dark corner of Middle-earth, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories from the lore. Let us know in the comments what other hidden powers or forgotten creatures you want to see us explore next. And if you want to support the channel directly, think about joining our community. Thanks for watching.